Welcome to the series of Relational Database Management System. Myself is Fatima Rafiq, Assistant Professor, Abedar Amda Senior College, PCA Department. We have already started with the concurrency control. We have seen what is log-based protocol and what is timestamp. Today, we will be looking to the variation in the timestamp based protocol, that is a Thomas Wright rule. In the previous lecture, we have already seen a timestamp based protocol. In the timestamp based protocol, we will be having a two scenario when the transaction is wants to execute for read data item, and another situation when the transaction wants to write the data item. In the Thomas Wright rule, we will be having a same rule, reading rule same as the previous, but we will be modifying the rules of timestamp based protocol for a writing situation. Here, for a reading, if any transaction T1 issue or wants to read the data item Q, if the transaction is having a lesser timestamp than the write, then at that time reading will be cancelled and the transaction T1 has to roll back. If the transaction T1 wants to read the data item and if it is having a higher or equal timestamp as a write timestamp, means it is reading the updated value. At that time we can allow the reading operation to be executed successfully, and we will update the read timestamp of the data item. For a writing situation, for a writing purposes, like for example, if you consider this particular example here, this writing is the writing which, if the transaction, like we have a transaction T1 and T2. Here the transaction T1 has a timestamp 11:30, where the timestamp of T2 is 11:32. Transaction T1 is having a timestamp 11:30. It means that it is a transaction which came first. And then transaction T2, because it is having a timestamp 11:32, it has to be executed after the T1. But if we see here, the write timestamp is 11 of T1 is 11:35, where the write timestamp of T2 is 11:34. This is a scenario where a transaction T1 miss its slots. This write has to be executed before the T2 write. So if we are doing this right, it means that we are creating the inconsistency in the database. So that's why we avoid this writing. We say that T1 transaction that you need to roll back yourself and you need to come with the new timestamp. So this is the rule which we followed in the timestamp based protocol, which is a simple protocol. But when we consider this situation, like for example, let's suppose here we are doing a writing operation, and these writings are the blind write. Blind write, we already know that if we are writing the data item without reading, without updating, so that particular type of writing is called as blind writing. Writing the data item without reading. So the Thomas Wright rule is actually a variation. It is a improvement whenever the write is a blind write. It will always, we can use this in the case where the data item wants to write, the transaction wants to write the data item, but that write is a blind write. If it is a blind write, then it is eligible to use the Thomas Wright rule. Otherwise, we will not use the Thomas Wright rule. Let's understand the Thomas Wright rule by using the example. Let's consider the same table, but I'll be doing some modification in it. Let's take here, I have a data item Q. I'll be taking this and writing here. I'll be removing this because it is a blind write. We know that blind write is a write which is a write without the reading. So let's suppose if this is a scenario here, let's consider the T1 transaction is having a timestamp as 11:30 and this is having a timestamp as 11:33. And after some time the T1 transactions come and it is having a timestamp as 11:35. T1 transactions wants to write the blind write. Let's suppose T1 wants to write 12, T2 wants to write 14. So because it is a blind write, whether the T1 executed first or T2 executed first, it does not have any effect on the data item A, because anyway it is a blind write. Here the transaction is not doing anything, but it is just writing the specific value. So in the timestamp based protocol, actually we avoid this. We didn't grant this writing. We avoid this writing because here this writing is actually has to happen before the before the T2. But if we pay attention, if it is a blind write, remember that the Thomas Wright rule will always work with a blind write. If it is a blind write, whether we are able to use, and what in the case of timestamp based protocol, what we say to this transaction, this T1 transaction, that this write timestamp is having the lesser value than the actual transaction, which is having a write timestamp as 11:32. So what you roll back. So roll back means then T1 transaction will come up with the new timestamp. But if we roll back it, like let's suppose if we are using the Thomas Wright rule, and if we roll back it, doesn't it make any changes in the T1 transaction? No, it will not make change in the T1 transaction, because this is anyway a blind write. Wait, so in this particular case, if we just avoid it, if we just avoid this writing, which is a blind writing, and we go further the execution of the another instruction, so avoiding this is ignoring this particular write, which is a blind write, is nothing but the improvement in the timestamp ordering protocol, which is called Thomas Wright rule. So see here, this is a condition, this is the second condition. If the Ti is having lesser timestamp than the write timestamp, then we ignore the absolute unused write operation. Because why it is called absolute or unused write operation? Because it is a blind write. It is not reading any value. It is just updating the value. This modification to the basic timestamp ordering protocol is called as Thomas Wright rule. So what we are doing, we are keeping all the rules of timestamp ordering protocol as it is, only we are changing the second rule. If in the second rule, in the basic timestamp ordering protocol, second rule is what? We are not allow the writing of the transaction which is having a lesser timestamp. We just cancel it and we tell the transaction to roll back itself. But if we change that and we just ignore that write operation and we execute rest of all instruction, so at that time this particular modification is nothing but modification in the timestamp based protocol, which is called as Thomas Wright rule. So this is the Wright rule, this is the rule of writing. This is called Thomas Wright rule. So if you are making, like for example, if you consider this example, if you just avoid or ignore this is a Thomas Wright rule. But if you are because of this write operation, if you cancel it and if you roll back the T1 transaction, that is the basic timestamp ordering protocol. So this is only the variation between the timestamp and the Thomas Wright rule. Thomas Wright rule actually guarantee the view serializability but not the conflict serializability. But we know that if it is a view serializability, it is also a consistent. The database state is always consistent. So we just pay attention to the consistency of the database. So whether we use a timestamp based protocol or whether we use a Thomas Wright rule, both will produce a consistent database. So this is all about the concurrency control mechanism of timestamp based protocol. Thank you.